Degas painted in every medium, but he's probably best known for his pastel painting. Pastels probably first came into existence through accident, like most things, as charcoal sticks on the fire, and I should imagine early man discovered the rain-washed colours, earth colours, red, ochre, yellow ochre and so on, out of the earth, the umbers and many colours, probably rolled them up, may have wee-weed on them, probably, rolled them into little cigar shapes and draw little pictures on caves and things. So pastels in that sense have probably been here for God knows millions of years. But then, according to history, let's say it was on paper, 15th century, and it wasn't developed until really Rosalba Carrera came in the 18th century and made them as famous as they are now. She had an enormous, I mean really a staggering, fantastic effect, speaking artistically, being of course Venetian, steeped in the Venetian tradition. She came to Paris and was a wow. I mean, it's the only way you can describe it. Everyone went potty to get her work. There was a whole schools of pastelists after her. Many went to her for advice. She taught freely. And Quentin de la Tour is one, and Chardin, another. And they, too, are always synonymous with beauty, as draftsmanship. I mean, Latour's work is fantastic for its characterization of the sitters. They did mainly portraiture, and Chardin probably would have done some still lifes if he loved that. And people like Francis Coates and John Russell practiced it to a great degree. Of course, Gainsborough practiced it. And one can almost say most painters practiced it in one way or another, usually, not necessarily professionally, but as sketches, because it comes under the realm, although we call it pastel painting, it comes under the realm of drawing. Degas would quite naturally go to it because of the quality of the medium and the immediacy of the result and the relatively simple way he could cart round half a dozen or a dozen sticks in a little box and make colour notes without knocking up colour on a palette in the middle of a cafe concert. In 1874, Degas painted one of his most famous paintings of a ballet scene which is called The Dance Class. The original is an oil painting, and I've made a pastel drawing out of this to save making a slavish copy of the original oil painting, to show a little of his technique of working. He would most probably use camera to make a few photographs, and then would make drawings from these and from life, so that these are more or less the ingredients, the mixture to make the pudding. Each one of these persons, although is not identifiable, except possibly for Jules Perrault, who's a famous ballet master, old Jules holding the stick that he thumped the floor at the time for the girls to make their various movements. And he taught in all the great ballet schools of Paris. These girls are more or less anonymous, but they would have been known to Degas because he saw their faces, they posed for him. He made numerous sketches, both in the studio and in the ballet schools and behind the schools, in the foyers and everything. They would work in many mediums, and having decided to make this painting, instead of kind of posing it all was impossible because of the movement, and even the camera of those days would have been over an hour probably, and everyone having to stand still. He went to his portfolio of sketches. This is why some of these sketches are dated at different periods from the physical happening of the painting itself. Degas would have used probably charcoal and white, being a very simple medium, in order to achieve his ends, to give him a very quick and rough sketch in, and made probably several of them. And probably the ultimate sketch for his painting would have been similar to this, in which he utilizes the figures from his sketchbooks and photographs from his camera and his pre-knowledge, and incredible knowledge of what went on behind the scenes in the theatre and ballet and so on, and would have established this. He had a predilection unusual amongst his contemporaries of observing, as Deleuze-Lautrec had done in the Moulin Rouge and all that, the attitudes of the people, the barman, the work people, the general aspect of low life, as it's termed, and anyone scratching their neck, back, behind or anything would have afforded a touch of humour in an otherwise serious occupation. And quite obviously in a dance class, I personally have never been in one, too fat probably, but they would have a kind of boredom, and you can imagine well into the afternoon after a hard day's practicing how this sweat and tears and so on, and the little girls would sit discomforted in the corners of rooms discussing their boyfriends or whatever, and there's a girl here scratching her back, and this lady here taking more or less an interest in Jules, who's talking to the girl here describing how badly she just pirouetted or something. And so the whole thing has this kind of laconic attitude of the late afternoon where people are pretty fed up with everything and wish they could go home. And he would observe these things, and this would give him a kind of impetus to destroy the myth that all is beautiful on the stage. We all know that there's sweat behind the scenes, very much so in some cases. And you have this wonderful design creeping through this particular painting with the columns, they're pilasters actually, pilasters doing a downward stroke, and all downward strokes, all lateral strokes, downward and across, create calm and peace. And within this calm and peace is the bustle and activity, but laconically so, no mad movement, of these girls standing and waiting for their instructions or bored with it all. The next move would be to make a series of sketches in colour. This, he would probably use watercolour, gouache, any tempera, anything like this, just to get a feeling. But you must remember, in a dress rehearsal, they would be wearing colour. The sashes, especially of the girls, presented themselves. And as he grew older, like most people, he exaggerated everything. So the little sashes of the girls, the ribbons in the hair, the very effeminate and very French aspect of ballet in France would be brought forth in a very undistinguishable way of painting, because it had never been painted before quite like this. In the early ballet paintings, 17th century and so on, they emphasised more on the movement and the what we could call the attenuated form in the sense of the way they drew. But Degas realised that with pastel especially, he would have the chance of giving the vibrancy of movement, the flickering momentary touches, dashes of colour in amongst the flower of all the tulle and dresses of the girls, which were in themselves probably quite tatty and sweat-stained, but they look extremely beautiful in a painting. From the sketch we made previously, this is another drawing taken from that, on pale yellow paper mounted on board, which should have a coarse surface to take up the pigment of pastels. And this is depicting Degas' own personal technique of applying tempera or gouache, poster colour, first, before the application of pastel. The reason for this is, if it's followed through scientifically and you've used what we call the Venetian technique in painting, in pastel, you have warm colours under cold, cold colours under warm, which gives the vibrancy apart from the impasto created by the pastel itself. So he would give successive applications of pastel, fixing, more application, fixing, so on until he was satisfied with his work. I can't work in the scale he works because one needs quite a large piece of paper. And so I've reduced the whole thing down. His own pastels are enormous, many of them are of great size, but it would be sufficient to show his technique. It's best to always keep the pastels covered, to keep away damp. Select a few colours at first. Now, as he's working, he would be aware of the light itself. And the light in this painting is coming from here, because the window here tells you there's a window here, probably. The light's coming here. So bearing this in mind, as Turner would in his skies or whatever, he knows that the white is coming at the backs of everything. And the dark will be this side, and there will be reflected lights, what we call reflected lights, coming from the green wall. So I'll do a bit of house painting. He would work very quickly. This is light. This is light. The colour of the wall is green. It's probably a green distemper in those days. And he would depict this very quickly with the side of the pastel, making no attempt to fuse it with a touche, which is the old method of the masters before him. Variations like this of colour, which register from a distance with much more vibrancy. One green, I've used one green and white. Now I pick up another green. I'm not over-exaggerating. This is virtually as fast as he would work. And so we achieve a certain vibrancy, and here we would smudge a bit in order to create a little bit of merging up into the cornice part. He would bring in a little bit of the green up under there, because colour always lends itself to the adjacent areas of whatever. And then very quickly, ignoring, his underpainting is very strong. This serves a dual purpose of softening the drawing lines that are all going to the vanishing point, and at the same time creating a unity. And white, as a non-colour, partakes, it's a negation of all colour. It would partake very happily any colour around it. He'd step back, see what he'd done, shadow, go forward again, and liven it up a bit. He was well aware of the value of relative gold against white and green, and the entablature here, it's probably got gold leaf on it in the original building. And following his lines down, he would put a few touches of ochre, gold ochre, very appropriately named, to depict the light that is caught, and then a little higher light to emphasize that, knowing that back from the picture, these touches would, we hope, register as a light. And then don't worry if pastel is always breaking, doesn't matter how careful you are. They're always handy. Put them in a little tin box and be grateful you've got them. They always come in usually very precious little pieces at the end of the day you pick up, and you're glad you didn't throw them into the waste basket. And then the girl here has a green sash. And he would want very much aesthetically to bring this green through the picture. So he'd treat this little girl to a bit of green, and so on throughout the picture. And in the same effect, this girl has this red on the hair and the lip. So he would tick, tick, tick through, and I believe there's a figure here where he actually puts a green, little green sash on her. Sorry, a little red sash on there, and a little red jersey on the old chap. I put in these in pure colour to show how they're carried through. At this stage, he would have fixed this, just to hold it, to give him a chance to draw on top of this. I'll now raise the easel a little. He would now ignoring the figures because Sir Joshua, not because Sir Joshua Reynolds said it, but it's a known fact that the background is as important as the figures. Indeed, shapes within shapes are as important as the shapes themselves. If you look at a horse or a human being, it's the shape between the legs that tells me, for example, that I've drawn this leg too far away from this, because the shape in there should be less. And we learn, we double check like this. And you very quickly establish let's call it a floor colour, which is it's a neutral colour actually. There's a little doggy here. And these dark accents are going over his pastel, and also over his gouache or tempera. The shadows from the staff of Jules would throw a line like this. And as crudely as one applies it, it gives a direction of the plane of the floor and also a certain movement, giving the movement of the drawing. And it always gradates, shadow always gradates from strong to weak. And if the lines are taken across, it binds figures together. And in all kinds of painting in which shadow is depicted, it helps the light, it creates the ambience of the painting. Indeed, it creates the mood quite often. Up here he has, and you must remember I'm not working from the original and don't know the colours exactly, but up here, and I'm doing a pastel on the original as an oil painting, there are the shadows around the girl's feet, which one emphasises this, and after puts light on it, and this, and afterwards you put light on it, and a dark accent here and there, just to create the more dark you put, the lighter the twos become. And the area around this figure is very difficult to draw, this type of figure, but Degas was almost obsessed with the back view of people, which he'd taken, of course, from Ang, and was well aware of the... She also would be standing based on the lateral, with her back towards you. It gives you the feeling you want to look over her shoulder into the picture. And all these ploys are used by painters as part of their craft. And the beauty of pastel is the smudgy quality. You can get different textures according to the paper you're working on. It's a messy business, but quite beautiful. And remembering the green of the sash, the walls, as an excuse to bring green back into this part of the picture, he's drawn, or painted in this case, a very beautiful watering can, which was used to lay the dust kicked up by the little sweetie pies. After the first or second coat applied of pastel, it's necessary to fix it. This can be done with an atomizer. All over, and this dries extremely quickly. As this painting has been fixed, it gives you a chance to redraw. So with a little charcoal, it's possible to make a few marks here and there to redraw it slowly and check the drawing. And in pastel, one must realise that the vibrancy of it is soon lost. It's necessary at some stage to think shoes. I will draw all the shoes. So you pick up a little shoe colour. These little marks will register eventually. Bring in little bits of drawing in. Having got the shoe colour, we'll call it, we now use it as a lip colour. Put in little bits of lipstick on the ladies, which is a delightful occupation. Or taking it off's better. Oh, sorry about that, Jules. Little ticks here and there. And surprisingly enough, they will register. Having licked them and chewed them, and looked round for other possible traces of red, you remember that there would be colour in the cheeks, so we will give a little smudge there to give her a little colour, and a little warmth where the fleshy part comes, a little drawing where the hand is, a little realisation of the foreshortening of the arm. There's a piece of red goes down there in the fan. All these little pieces echo. We go back onto the jersey, over on the little piece of red on the lady here, a little warmth under her face. There's a lady behind her, the lady here. Now all these warmths are opposing the cool lights, the coolth. So a blue haze is whispered around the areas going away from us into the wall, and all these will register as aerial perspective, around figures. And in the process, by natural selection almost, it creates an aerial perspective, a mystery and a smoothness and a roughness and a softness and a hardness. So you get textural differentiation and a kind of alternation which, depending upon the artist, creates the mood and mystery of the picture. At a late stage in the painting, two things transpire, necessary, is the ultimate whites, lights, and the ultimate darks. I've indicated some of the whites on the tutus. They use black, or he used black, extensively to differentiate the flesh and to create a foil. And this will bounce across. This is an old trick. It was used by Gainsborough, in which it was said that his painting in the Kenwood Museum would fall to pieces if it wasn't for the black band round the lady's neck. And this is true. It holds, it gives a relative tone to everything. It all can be merged in shadows with a finger and so forth. Black is a magical colour. Renoir called black the queen of colours, but it was taken away from the palettes of the Impressionists. So we come back eventually to the old fellow's staff, down here on the golden section, dark, with its little bit of shadow going through. And so we could go right through the whole picture, little bits of dark on all the ribbons. And black is the one colour that doesn't change as it goes away into the distance. In other words, it retains its darkness as it goes away. The closer black is to you, the greyer it becomes, contrary to all other colours. And it's an exquisite colour of its kind. And just a few little touches here and there, redrawing, recreating, until the painting is finished.